Hello, welcome back to the workshop. In today's video, we're going to restore the frame on my 1953 NSU Max motorcycle. It's going to turn out great. It'll look just like this. If that interests you, well, stay tuned. We'll get started. When this bike was original, it would have had a suspension seat. So the seat would sit on a lever that attached up through these front holes, and it was supported on a pair of springs. So the seat would ride up and down, and you would get a suspension effect from the seat. When they bought this bike back in '77, I think is when they did it, they welded in just a piece of metal here that they could bolt that old seat to. For me to put this back to original, or to restore the old original suspension seat, this has got to come out. So I'm going to take the reciprocating saw, I'm going to cut this blank out, and then I'll probably have to use the Dremel and grind these welds out, kind of get it back to that stamped steel look.
So it took quite a bit of time, and I did most of it by hand with a file, but I think this is looking pretty good. I measured it with the seat piece that moves up and down inside, and I've got the same distance all the way around, so I think it fits really well. Whoever did this cut the tail off, and then they bent the lip outward. It looks like with a pair of pliers. So the first thing here, we need to get this contour fixed so it looks right, so it fits right. Then once that's done, I need to figure out what they removed, reconstruct that, and get it welded on. I started down the path of fitting a fender from another bike, but the curvature on that fender, it just wasn't quite right. So after toying around with it a bunch, I decided it was probably worth doing it right. So I got this fender. This came from Germany. The reason I got this is I've got it here, I've got it mounted to the cargo brackets, and I can see now exactly what was cut off of this original frame. So the frame is put together with two halves that are welded together. But looking at photos, it looks like that strip that runs along the back that would cover this fender is one piece. I'm not entirely certain how it was attached, but what I'm going to do is take a single piece of 16 gauge steel. I'm going to shape the edges to match that relief that's there, and then I'm going to weld it on, and then I'll grind with the flap disc, I'll grind that contour back in. Hopefully I'll make it look close to what is original. All I've really got to go on are photos. I've replicated the cover, or the strip that used to be back here, as best I can based on photos. I've got it sitting in here, it's clamped in place, and it wraps around the underside. And what I'm going to do is just tack it a little bit around and shape it. That way, once I get it stitched in place, then I can fit the back.
That looks alright, I think.
We'll do any remaining fine contouring with some body filler. We'll do that later. So I've got the frame in pretty good shape now. Somebody had drilled a lot of holes in it, so I welded those shut. The center stand brackets, they were gone, so I made new ones. I welded those in place. I couldn't find anything locally that was the right dimension, so we bored out some black pipe and made that work. And then I noticed a lot of the welds had cracked, so I went back and I re-welded the entire frame. So the next thing to do, I'm going to start with body filler and see if I can get this ready to paint. For some reason, I can't find the footage of the first coat of filler and the first coat of primer on the frame. I do have footage for that on the tank, so I'm going to use that as a stand-in so I can show you how that was done. Once we get through that, we'll come back, I'll show you the second coat of filler and the second coat of primer on the frame, and we'll go from there. So once the filler is fully cured, I block sand it with some 60 grit paper. This allows me to quickly contour the repair to match the surrounding area. It's beneficial to sand in a crisscross pattern. That'll help you avoid sanding flat spots or digging grooves with the sandpaper. For primer, I'm using SprayMax's 2K Rapid Filler Primer. This stuff is catalyzed, it sets up chemically. What this does is it fills in scratches and air bubbles and other imperfections in the bodywork so that you have a nice smooth surface for paint. Now that this is primed, there were a couple spots that stood out where I really wasn't happy with the bodywork. There was a dent or a ding right in this area. It was shallow, but you could see it once it was sprayed. And then the other is I did not have the contour here where the fender meets that lip I added. It wasn't consistent, it wasn't quite right. So I built that out with filler as well. And I had initially run this crack all the way down, but looking at photos of these, it looks like it was actually welded very similarly to the way this one's done. So I redid that to make it match. So I'm going to sand this bodywork down and then I'll give this another coat of primer and then we can wet sand it and paint it. I am using just a 2x4 with some sandpaper stapled to it to block sand this. Believe it or not, that 2x4 is probably 10 years old. I've used it forever. Once I have the area flat, I just use some sandpaper freehand to blend in the contour. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm going to vacuum everything up here, but this is what that ended up looking like. I took a couple coats back here, which is why you see the color difference. But otherwise, this is feeling really nice. This is 120 grit sandpaper. I usually go a little more coarse than this, but since this filler is so thin, if I went more coarse, it would just pull it off the fender. So I think this looks really good. I'm going to take it back outside. I'm going to activate another can of primer and I'm going to reprime all the areas I sanded. That way I can wet sand it and I've got one good continuous coat of primer. The typical advice you'll receive when applying spray paint, especially if you get it from one of those DIY home channels, is that you want to apply it in light, even coats and build it up. That does not work with automotive paint. This particular primer is designed to fill in small scratches and other small defects. If you tried to apply it in light coats, it would not fill that in and you'd end up with something that had the texture of sand. With this primer, you want to apply it in a single coat. One good, heavy coat that will dry with a consistent finish, but not so much paint that you'll end up with runs. Knowing where that boundary is, that's a skill that you develop with time. I've been painting for 30 years, and I know right where that edge is. If you're new to using these automotive type finishes, I'd highly recommend you practice and learn exactly how the paint performs before you apply it to what you want to paint. Every time I share a video of myself painting with that 2K paint, somebody always asks, do you really wear that getup? And the answer is yes, yes I do. So that 2K paint, this is a professional automotive grade paint. It's a two-part, it's catalyzed. So it's exactly the same paint you would paint if you were spraying it with a gun. The only difference is it's in a can and there's less of it. If I was spraying with a gun, you wouldn't think twice about it if you saw me wearing gear. But because it's in a spray can, people seem to be less worried about it or less worried about the risks. This is what that warning label looks like on the paint. So here's what I'm wearing. So I wear a Tyvek suit. This keeps that paint off my clothes so I don't take it in the house with me. I wear rubber gloves because that paint sometimes spits. I don't want it on my hands. And then I wear a supplied air respirator. This is connected to a filter that sits further away and filters the air, so that what I'm breathing in is fresh air and not through a mask. This is the safest way when dealing with these isocyanatic paints. If you use this stuff, beware, you're going to need some professional grade safety equipment. Don't skimp on it. Don't think you can go to the hardware store and get one of those masks and go to town. This stuff, you know, you might get away with that once or twice, but this stuff is cumulative. So you may not notice the effects now, but in 20 years you might have lung cancer. So it's always better to be safe. This has had a couple days to cure. Now I'm ready to sand it. I'm going to sand it down with 600 grit wet or dry. This is about as fine as I ever go when I'm doing paint. But what this will do is it'll flatten out this primer and sort of level out those defects that we use the primer to fill. And it will get it ready to paint. It'll give it a nice surface for that paint to bond to. So I'm going to wet sand this fully with 600. Then I'll wipe it down, clean it with alcohol, and it'll be ready to paint. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to switch over now to the other side of the frame. There's a lot of parts on this frame that don't need to be perfect, so I'm just hitting it with a wet scuff pad. And the big reason for the scuff pad is it's much easier to get it in and around things like these tubes. So the part of this frame, the only part you actually see is this part right here. Everything else is covered by engine and by the tank and the seat, and on the other side the oil tank and the airbox. So this is really the only place right here that needs to be really nice. All right, yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. All right, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to blow it down with compressed air, and then I'll get a clean microfiber, and we'll give it a final rinse. Just make sure it's clean. And then I can take these outside and I can paint them. For the paint, I'm going to use Spray Max 2K Hot Rod Black paint. This has a nice satin finish. I've got a lot of history with this. I've used it on a lot of motorcycles. I've used it on automotive undercarriage parts. It's good paint. When you first spray it, it seems soft, but after 2 weeks, it's solid, it's durable. So I chose this. I think this sheen or this color is going to look right on the bike.
and I've got good luck with this. I've got a lot of parts hanging out there to paint, so I'm going to fire off 3 cans. Once this is catalyzed, it's only good for about 24 hours. So I only want to pop off what I need. These run about 30 bucks a can, so I don't want to waste.
Despite being a matte finish, this paint can be a bit difficult to work with. It's really easy to get overspray, and it's also really easy to end up with differences in sheen. What works best is to apply the paint in a good heavy coat and maintain a wet finish across the entire part. Anywhere that it dries and you end up with a wet edge laid over a dry edge, you'll end up with an overspray texture. You'll see me paint over the same part 2 or 3 times. What I'm doing there is getting a consistent wet finish so that when it dries with an even sheen. This paint will tolerate being applied thick. The only thing that impacts is how long it takes to cure. After applying it in a single coat, I typically leave it alone, let it cure for a week. Alright, this is how that turned out. The sheen is really nice. The bodywork is good and smooth. I couldn't be happier with the results. I did find one ding right on the top of the fender here that I missed, but the rear rack is going to sit over top of it. You'll never notice. So I've got all the parts painted for this bike now. It's ready to go together, but I'm going to save that for another video. So if you enjoyed this, you might enjoy that too. Turn on notifications. That way when that comes out, you'll know about it. If you're subscribed to my channel, I want to say thank you. I really do appreciate it. If you're not, consider subscribing. So with that, thanks for watching.